We all see the headlines about billionaires, these almost mythical figures with staggering amounts of wealth. Ever really wonder, like, where do they come from?
Exactly. Or what industries really churn them out? Is it all inherited?
Right. Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today. We've got our hands on some really interesting 2023 data covering what? All 2,640 billionaires globally.
That's the one. It's a great analysis done by Robert Modolo over on Kaggle. He
Hmm.
used Python, pandas, all the data science tools to try and, decode this very exclusive club.
Data wizardry, I like it. So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack this data and see what maybe surprising patterns pop out.
Yeah, things like which sectors are the real billionaire factories? Where are they clustered geographically?
The big one, are they mostly self-made, pulling themselves up by their bootstraps, or did they inherit that giant fortune?
We'll even look at their average age, and this one's kind of quirky. Their birth months. Apparently there's something interesting there.
Birth months. Okay, now I'm intrigued.
Yeah. But just a quick heads up, this data is a snapshot from 2023. The financial world moves fast, right? So things might have shifted a little since then.
Good point. Always good to remember the context. But the trends should still give us some pretty solid insights.
For sure, the underlying patterns are likely still very relevant.
Okay, let's get down to brass tacks then.
Yeah.
Industries. Where's the billionaire action happening? Which fields are creating the most?
All right, so globally, the big leader is finance and investments. It comes in with 372 billionaires.
No huge surprise there, I guess.
Yeah.
Wall Street, hedge funds.
Exactly, all that money moving money around. Right behind that, though, is manufacturing with 324.
Oh, interesting. So making actual stuff still counts for a lot.
It really does. Think heavy industry, cars, consumer goods, that kind of thing. And then number 3 is technology with 314. Again, probably expected given the last couple of decades.
Yeah, the tech boom is undeniable. Anyone else notable?
Well, fashion and retail and food and beverage are also pretty significant globally. People always need clothes and food, right? Creates a lot of value.
True.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the global scene. How does it stack up in the U.S. specifically? Is it the same picture?
Mostly similar at the top, but with some key differences. Finance and investments is still number 1 in the U.S.,
Okay.
but technology jumps up even more prominently, grabbing that second spot, really shows the weight of, Silicon Valley.
Right, the sheer scale of U.S. tech firms. Makes sense.
Yeah. Food and beverage and fashion and retail are strong here too. But what's quite telling is manufacturing. It's less dominant in the U.S. billionaire list compared to globally.
Huh. Why is that, do you think?
Robert's analysis suggests it might point towards a more service-based or tech-focused billionaire class here in the States. Less traditional heavy industry at the very top, maybe.
Interesting shift.
Oh, and sports. That's another one that pops up more noticeably in the U.S. rankings. Think team owners like Stan Kroenke with the Rams and Arsenal, that kind of massive sports empire.
Ah, yes, the billionaire sports moguls. Okay, so that's the number of billionaires per industry. What about the total wealth held in those sectors? Does the industry with the most billionaires also have the most collective cash?
Not necessarily, and that's where it gets kind of interesting. Technology, while maybe not having the most billionaires globally, actually leads in total accumulated wealth.
Wow.
And the U.S. absolutely dominates that tech wealth space. It really underlines the massive valuations of companies like Apple, Microsoft, Google, Meta.
So fewer tech billionaires maybe, but each one is sitting on a, relatively speaking, bigger pile of money.
Exactly. Or at least the combined wealth is just astronomical. Fashion and retail and finance and investments also hold enormous global wealth collectively. So an industry like manufacturing might create many billionaires, but the average wealth per billionaire might be a bit lower than, say, the top tech founders.
Got it. Different distributions of wealth within the sectors. Now, you mentioned fashion and retail. The analysis highlighted France specifically, right? What's the deal there? I'm picturing Paris, runways.
You're pretty much spot on. France has this incredibly deep cultural and economic history in luxury goods and fashion.
Like the big names, Chanel, Dior.
Hermes, Louis Vuitton, yeah. And the data backs it up. Robert found significant growth in online fashion sales there, clothing bringing in billions. You can't talk French wealth without mentioning Bernard Arnault and LVMH, right? It's practically synonymous with French luxury.
It really is like cheese in Switzerland, almost. Okay, so summing up industries. Finance, tech, and things we buy, clothes, food, are major generators. U.S. is super heavy on tech wealth, but globally, making stuff still matters a lot.
That's a good summary. Shall we switch gears to geography? Where are these folks actually living?
Yeah, let's pull out the world map. Where are the billionaire hotspots?
Okay, no huge shocker at the very top. The United States leads by a pretty wide margin, 754 billionaires, according to this 2023 data.
Wow. Okay. Who's next?
China comes in second, with a still very substantial 523. Then there's a bit of a drop-off. You've got India with 157, then Germany at 102, the UK with 82, Russia close behind at 79, then Switzerland with 78, Hong Kong at 68, Italy 55, and Singapore rounds out the top 10 with 46.
The U.S. lead is really significant. Does that also translate to total wealth? Does the U.S. hold the most billionaire dollars, too?
It does, yes. The U.S. tops the list for both the number of billionaires and their total accumulated wealth. It just highlights the sheer economic power concentrated there. We think Wall Street, Silicon Valley combined.
And China.
China is second in total wealth as well, but the gap between the U.S. and China in terms of that total wealth figure is quite noticeable in this data set.
Okay, so it seems intuitive that bigger economies generally have more billionaires. Is that correlation pretty strong?
It is generally. There's a definite link between a country's GDP and its billionaire count. Larger economies tend to foster more billionaires.
But are there exceptions, like smaller countries doing surprisingly well?
Absolutely. That's where places like Switzerland and Hong Kong stand out.
Ah, right. You mentioned them in the top 10.
Yeah. Despite having smaller overall economies compared to, say, India or even the UK, they have a really high concentration of billionaires.
Why is that? Finance hubs.
Exactly. It's largely down to their very established, very strong financial sectors and policies that are attractive for wealth management and investment. They kind of act like magnets for international capital and wealthy individuals.
Makes sense. So it's not just the size of the economy, but the type of economy and its rules. What about just population? Does having more people mean more billionaires?
Not directly, no. Look at India. Huge population, second largest in the world, but way fewer billionaires than the US or China.
Right, only 157 compared to 754 and 523.
Yeah, it shows that population size alone isn't the main driver. It's more about the economic structures, the opportunities, the regulatory environment. And on the flip side, those smaller places like Switzerland and Hong Kong have a very high number of billionaires per capita relative to their population.
Yeah, okay, so ecosystem matters more than just headcount. Let's zoom back into the U.S. then. Where are they concentrated within the country?
Regionally, the analysis shows the West and the South leading the way. The Northeast is strong too, but follows those two.
And the Midwest.
The Midwest lags behind a bit. Robert suggests this might be partly linked to the, relative decline of some traditional manufacturing hubs there, although there's still significant wealth in finance, healthcare, et cetera, in the Midwest too. And U.S. territories have very few.
West and South. Okay, any specific states leading the charge?
Oh, yeah. California is number one. You immediately think Silicon Valley, right? Tech, AI, venture capital, it's the global hub.
So like Mark Zuckerberg, Larry Page, Sergey Brin, those kinds of names originating there.
Precisely. Or thinking back to Steve Jobs with Apple. Then you've got New York, number two. That's Wall Street, finance, investment, real estate.
The financial heartland. Maybe someone like Michael Bloomberg.
Good example, yeah. His empire is based there. Then Florida is climbing the ranks fast.
Why Florida? Sunshine.
That helps. But also, very favorable tax policies and a booming real estate market has attracted a lot of wealth recently. You hear about people like Ken Griffin moving his hedge fund Citadel down to Miami.
Right, the tax angle is huge. Any other big states?
Texas and Illinois are also major players. Texas with energy, but also growing tech and other sectors. Illinois has a mix, including finance, industry, healthcare.
But California tech, New York finance, Florida attracting wealth. What about specific cities?
New York City, unsurprisingly, leads the pack. The sheer concentration of financial power there is immense.
Makes sense.
Then you have San Francisco and Los Angeles out west, driven by tech, and for LA, entertainment as well.
The innovation and media hubs.
Exactly. But it's also interesting, Robert's work notes the rise of other cities like Dallas and Atlanta. They're seeing growing numbers of billionaires, suggesting maybe a broadening economic base in those regions too.
Good to see some diversification. Okay, so key takeaways on geography. U.S. dominates. China's second. Economic factors and policies, not just population, are crucial. And wealth likes to cluster in those big innovation and finance centers, but tax policies can definitely sway things.
You got it. Now maybe we tackle that other big question, self-made versus inherited.
Yes. The age-old question, pun definitely intended. Did they build it themselves or were they born on third base? What does the data say?
Well, get ready for maybe a bit of a surprise or at least a challenge to the stereotype. The data actually shows the majority are self-made.
Really? What's the breakdown?
About 69%, that's 1,812 individuals in this data set are classified as self-made. Only 31%, or 828, primarily inherited their wealth.
Wow, almost 70% self-made. That does kind of bust the myth of the idle heir being the typical billionaire.
It really does. Now, self-made doesn't always mean starting from absolutely nothing, right? Access to education, networks, maybe some initial capital always helps.
Sure, there are degrees of self-made.
Right. But Robert's analysis emphasizes that it clearly highlights the huge role of entrepreneurship, innovation, and, frankly, building successful businesses and creating today's massive fortunes.
Okay, so where are these self-made billionaires cropping up most often? Which industries?
The data points strongly towards technology, finance, and manufacturing again. These seem to be the sectors where, disruptive ideas or scaling a business can lead to that kind of extreme wealth creation.
Can you give examples? Like who embodies that?
Sure, think of someone like Elon Musk, spanning tech and manufacturing with Tesla and SpaceX. Or in finance, maybe Ray Dalio, who founded Bridgewater Associates from scratch.
Gotcha. And on the flip side, where is inherited wealth more common?
Relatively speaking, within their sectors, inherited wealth seems more prevalent in industries like real estate and media.
Ah, that makes sense. Long-standing family empires, maybe?
Often, yeah. Think about families owning major media conglomerates for generations, like maybe the Hearst family, or holding vast real estate portfolios passed down over decades. Those assets tend to stay in the family.
Interesting how the path to wealth differs across sectors. And I assume this self-made versus inherited picture also varies by country or region.
It does seem to. The data suggests some regions foster more of that entrepreneurial spirit, leading to more self-made billionaires, while others might have more established, older wealth structures where inheritance plays a bigger role.
Okay, so takeaway. Most are self-made, especially in tech, finance, manufacturing. Now, what about age? Are we talking wise old owls or young tech wizards?
Mostly the wise old owls, actually. The average age in the data set is 63 and a half.
63.5.
And the median age is even slightly higher, at 65. So the bulk of billionaires are really in their 60s, 70s, even 80s. The distribution chart peaks right there.
So generally it takes a while to get there. It's not typically an overnight thing, despite some headlines.
Exactly. Those younger tech billionaires we hear about, they do exist, and they pull the average age down slightly.
That's why the average is lower than the median.
Right. There's a smaller group of folks in their 20s, 30s, 40s, think Zuckerberg when he started, or maybe younger heirs who bring the average down. But the typical path involves decades of work or investment.
What about gender? We know it's predominantly men, but are the ages similar for the women who are billionaires?
Yeah, it's quite skewed, about 87% male to 13% female in this data set. But interestingly, the average and median ages are almost identical for both men and women, right around that 63 to 65 mark.
So when women do reach that status, it's often at a similar life stage.
It seems so, though the low number of women definitely points to, historical and ongoing systemic barriers in wealth creation.
Absolutely. The analysis also looked at birth decades. Any patterns there?
Yeah, this was interesting. There's a clear peak in the number of billionaires born in the 1950s and 1960s.
Why then? Post-war boom.
That's likely a big part of it. That era saw huge economic expansion, the rise of new technologies, globalization kicking in, lots of opportunities for wealth building.
Okay, and what about later decades? Fewer billionaires born in the 70s, 80s, 90s?
There's a noticeable decline in the numbers for those later decades in this data set.
Any ideas why?
Robert suggests a few possibilities. It could just be an age lag, people born then haven't hit that peak billionaire age yet.
Makes sense.
Could be a data lag too, maybe less complete info for younger cohorts. Or perhaps wealth dynamics are genuinely shifting for younger generations. We don't know for sure yet.
But across all decades?
Self-made remains the dominant category throughout. That seems consistent.
Okay, interesting historical context. Now,
Yeah.
to tease something quirky, the birth months. What did the data find?
Right. This was the real, moment in the analysis. Surprisingly, the data showed a noticeably higher number of billionaires born in January.
January. Seriously?
Yeah, both globally and looking just at the U.S. Now, big caveat. With data like this, you can always have random clusters or statistical noise.
Sure, could be coincidence.
Totally. But if we entertain the finding for a moment, it does make you wonder why. Why January?
I have no idea. What's the theory? Better Christmas presents leading to early investment genius.
Chuckles. Not quite. The leading hypothesis connects to something called the relative age effect, or RAE.
Relative age effect. What's that?
Think about school cutoff dates, or age groups in youth sports. They often run January 1st to December 31st, right?
Yeah, usually.
So a kid born in January is almost a full year older than a kid born in December within that same group.
Ah, okay. I see where this is going.
That extra year, or even just several months of development early on, physical size, maybe cognitive maturity, social skills, it can give them a slight edge.
Like being bigger in sports or maybe grasping concepts quicker in early grades.
Exactly. And those small advantages can potentially snowball. Maybe they get picked for better teams, put in advanced classes, gain confidence. It could create compounding opportunities over time.
That's a wild thought, that being among the oldest in your year group could somehow decades later correlate with becoming a billionaire.
It's a fascinating idea, isn't it? It ties into Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers. Remember we talked about Canadian hockey players?
Oh yeah, the ones born in January, February, March had a much higher chance of making it pro because they were slightly older and bigger at tryouts.
Precisely. Same principle. Gladwell argues these seemingly arbitrary advantages, like birth dates or even just being born at the right time in history, can play a significant role. He has that quote about replacing the patchwork of lucky breaks and arbitrary advantages with a society that provides opportunities for all.
Right, it's provocative. So the idea is this relative age advantage might translate somehow into the business world too.
That's the hypothesis. Studies have shown RAE exists in academics and sports. Now, obviously, being born in January doesn't make you a billionaire.
Clearly. Otherwise, we'd all be aiming for January babies.
Right. There's drive, intelligence, resources, luck, timing, countless critical factors.
Oh.
But the data presents this little anomaly. Robert jokingly called it a potential kickstart. Maybe that tiny initial edge, for a very small number of people, helps set them on a slightly different trajectory that, combined with everything else, leads to extreme outcomes.
Huh. January. Well, as an August baby, I guess my path to August heir status might be slightly tougher.
Suckles. Don't give up hope. But yeah, it's a quirky finding from the data.
Definitely something to chew on. Okay, let's try and wrap this all up. What are the main headlines from this deep dive into the 2023 billionaire list?
Okay, so key takeaways. Finance and tech are powerhouses for billionaire creation. The U.S. is the dominant player geographically, both in numbers and total wealth, with China second.
And most are self-made, not heirs.
Exactly. Around 69% self-made, challenging that stereotype. The average age is mid-60s, so it usually takes time. And possibly, just possibly, being born in January gives you some kind of tiny, almost imperceptible early advantage.
That last one is still blowing my mind a bit.
It's definitely the most unexpected bit.
Well, it's been a fascinating look into this world. While, joining the 3 Comma Club is pretty unlikely for most of us, understanding these patterns does shed light on bigger economic trends.
Absolutely. And it leaves you, the listener, with some things to think about, right? Like what other factors, maybe unexpected ones, might shape who becomes ultra wealthy in the future?
Or does that January thing make you reconsider how much random chance or seemingly small factors play a role in massive success?
Definitely food for thought.
If you want to dig into this data yourself, we'll put links in the description to the Kaggle dataset, Robert Medalla's GitHub analysis, and the visualization dashboard he created. Maybe there's even newer data out there by now for you to explore.
Yeah, dive in. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks, everyone.